Solutions for energy monitoring services. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just, you just triggered something with it being late coming to the table last time. It's late coming to the table again, because this contract states that it began July 1st, 2024, and I believe today is September 9th.
You're correct, Alder Festa.
Is this going to be a trend from the Board of Ed, or how do we address this to get these contracts in a timely fashion so we can question it appropriately before they actually start? Because I don't know.
No.
It seems like it's not a win-win for anybody.
I agree. That's why I'm here to look at the whole budget procurement contract process. So it's sequential, and not only do we have to, people, when they think things gotta go to the board, they don't think the Board of Auditors, they think it's gotta go to F&O, Finance Operations, then the Board of Ed, and the Board of Auditors should be the target first so that we can get it a month or two in advance. And that's one thing I've been working on with our facilities, staff, procurement, and budget. This is something that has to be corrected. I know I worked very closely with Jennifer Pugh when I was here before, and we made certain that we didn't have these hiccups. But we got good people. We just have to work out the processes.
Okay. And of course, I'm not trying to blame you, but just bring awareness that this has been happening, and
Yes.
maybe that deep dive needs to be a little deeper.
I agree.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Further questions from colleagues on item number 1? Seeing none, we're going to go ahead and move to item 2, which, the timing issue is there as well. So even before you begin your presentation, please do bring back to your colleagues on the Board of Education the message from this committee that we would very much appreciate future submissions being made in a more timely way.
Absolutely, and of course, the contract, no work has started, and will not start until the Board of Auditors approve it. Just like to make you aware of that. It's somewhat a ratification process, but I don't call it a ratification. But as you know, the average age of our buildings is 21 years old. HVAC systems typically have a life cycle of 20 years. At the most, you can maybe get 25 out of it. We're probably getting less and more phased because we do not have a predictive and preventive maintenance schedule. And that's something I've been working on. And luckily, we've been able to get some extra money to do small contracts to come in and work on chillers and insulation and R2 units. But this contract will help us immensely because school has started. We have a couple of schools where the HVAC systems are failing, and having them come in and reset everything so that we're not bringing in fans, sending kids to other places. This contract, I think, is more than what the whole HVAC contract was last year, but we do have more HVAC contracts, but we just need to get them to you timely so we're not doing too many repairs and not enough preventive maintenance. And this will help a great deal.
Thank you very much for your succinct presentation. Questions from colleagues on this proposed contract with the HVAC company listed in the order? Questions from colleagues on this item? Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this a company we've worked with?
Yes.
Is this the company that would change the filters as well?
Yes, we also have some filters in now that we can change out ourselves, but when they go in and see that the filters need to be changed or chillers, they will do that.
Have we been applying for the HVAC filter grants?
We applied for 2 and we were awarded 2. The grants, we have to put up the money first, then the state will reimburse us 80 to 88%. So I'm working to find funding so we can do it at Edgewood School. It's another school that we have to make our repairs. But I'm working to try to find money to put up to like 3.8 million so we can do those two schools.
And
But
this
it has
is-
to be the money, we have to spend it first, then be reimbursed. And we don't have that right now.
And this is for the filters that our school children have started school that need to be changed, but haven't been changed.
Some have, we have them already in place, but they're gonna do more than just change filters.
And there was no budget set aside for this. I mean, this isn't something new. And again, this is probably messages to be brought to the Board of Ed, because this isn't a joke that we need to play around with. I mean, this is our kids, and we know the challenges some of our schools are facing. It was in the press most recently with one of our high schools, and it's concerning because the grants have been in place for a while. We know that we have to pay in advance, yet no budget is being set up ahead of time, knowing that we'll get at least 80% of that funding back. Is any thought being done to consider this for, the next budget season, or?
Yes, it is. I've talked to the state and they're looking forward to us accepting the grant. There may be some pots of money that we could do, one if not two. One thing I'm working on is a RFP to be able to look at all of our facilities, look at repairs, maybe consolidation, maybe expanding a high school or two, so that we can go get this bonded. And rather than doing this piecemeal, we have, I think there was a school modernization program 10 years ago. I'm still working on the audit, believe it or not. And we'll go in with the city, go to the state, get bonded so we don't have to be doing the piecemeal approach that we're doing now.
But that's long-term. We obviously need a short-term fix to get to all our schools. I mean, where's the Board of Ed on this? Have they been talking about it?
Yes.
And that's it? I guess that was a short-ended question, right? Or close-ended?
It was definitely a yes/no question that led itself to the answer. Alder Festa, I think you're raising an issue of great public interest, of course. We want our children to be safe in their schools, and that includes breathing clean air. But we are here to talk about a contract. So let's get back to the contract with the Connecticut Control Corporation. Do you have any more questions about that contract?
Yeah, I mean, is that the company that also changes the filters, or is that separate?
Well, we do have, we have small contracts and companies that do those, like, I guess it's Tucker, when they go in and they see filters got to be changed, they change them. Our facilities people change them. But yes, they would do more, they would change filters if needed, but they would do more than just change filters.
Okay, so, I mean, this contract is for then just repairs,
Yep.
not the maintenance part.
There is some maintenance in here. When you go in and repair it, you want to come back and reset. Like say if you do something like HVAC systems, from my experience, you usually, once March 1st hits, you go check your HVAC. And then once July hits, you go check your boilers. That hasn't been done. And so by setting a schedule in place that I'm working on, we will not, it's like if you don't get your oil changed or you don't check your brakes. I mean, once I didn't check my brakes, so it wasn't just my brakes, it was my struts, rotors, everything else. So you have to go and do those routine things so that you see those, oh my God, things, you can correct them at maybe a third of the cost.
I'm a little concerned because it hasn't been done by this company, the routine, checks. Are they responsible for doing that?
Not all the checks. We have several contracts for
Okay.
HVAC.
Okay, so this company here, we call when we need repairs.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Fest. I see several people on the queue. Next would be Alder Ferraro Santana.
Well, I was going to, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to ask a question regarding the ARPA funding that was used to do a lot of the HVAC system, which we spent over $350,000 and none of the HVACs were changed. None of the filters were changed. All the schools were not done. And it was a big issue a few years ago.
This was last year?
Yes.
All right, I'll look into it, and find out what happened, if we have to go back and, issue a cure letter or try to recover funds, that's what I do, but I'm not privy to that information.
Yeah, it happened with the ARPA funds, and we spent an awful lot of money to do the HVAC systems and to have them go and inspect, especially at, I forget the school over on Woodford Avenue. There were tons of orders, and none of them were done. So, and I'm sure there's more schools like that. And I'm just going off the top of my head because this was an issue that was at the top of my list. So if we're issuing contracts for HVAC and maintenance, the filters go along with that. We need to make sure that they're doing it, and who's there checking to ensure that they're being done.
Now we have a facilities director who at this time is also filling in for the project manager who's no longer there.
Okay.
And so he and I meet just about every day, and we go through all these things because we're discovering things that we didn't know did happen or did not happen. So we're in a catch-up mode.
Thank you, I appreciate that, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Ferraro Santana.
But I'll look into it.
Of course, colleagues will remember that the issue of filters was, captured in a local newspaper article and was quite scandalous. We're not having a public hearing on that.
No.
So I've given some leeway to colleagues to ask questions beyond the scope of this item, but I'm going to bring it back just because we have 7 minutes.
But I'll look into it to have questions offline.
But I will consider and speak with leadership about appropriate follow-up on the broader issues that you're raising. And I think it's only fair to say that, at some point we'll want to have some follow-up feedback from the Board of Ed about the performance of this contractor in the performance of the duties that we're paying them to do. I see that we have Alders Hamilton and Punzo on the queue. Alder Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair Marshall. Good evening, sir. Good to see you back. This company, so what is all included in this maintenance contract for them? It just says the amount. How many schools do they have to do? Does it specify a guideline of 10 things, 12 things that has to be done in this $360,000? I mean.
Yes, we don't have we can't do all 40 schools, but we have those schools that we know where the HVAC units have gotten low and are failing. And so we'll make those priority and then come back as part of my plan, if we get the first tier, 10 to 12 schools, to come back with a second tier of schools.
So you expect this 360,000 to cover the first 10 schools in tier 1?
Yes, if they if they have just routine repairs and, maintenance, we could be able to stretch it, but if we don't start this contract, the next year, this could be double or triple because we haven't done it.
Right. And what is the term sole vendor? This is the only vendor that will be addressing this?
Yeah, they were certified, well, they were by the purchasing, they were the only one that was authorized to handle this type of work with these controls. It's sort of like, OEM, original equipment manufacturer, only that vendor can handle it, but come to find out that a lot of those OEM exclusive contracts are now not as prevalent because there are more players in the market. So next year we will see if there's other players that can do it at a fair price.
So you expect to come back to us next year with the same ask for this?
Well, hopefully not, hopefully it's less considering we do the routine things we have to do. But also I'm looking at the HVA systems across all 40 schools. And I'm gonna recommend, replacement. We have to do major work, minor work, a little checklist, and then we need to add another person, another tradesperson to do HVAC. We only got one person, one painter. And I'm looking at a staffing plan because I'm looking at the gap between what we have to do or must do and what we don't.
Sounds like a tall order. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alder Hamilton, and I will be glad to talk with leadership about appropriate follow-up with you, Mr. Carter. We recognize that you've been with the district for a very long time, but we certainly have a lot of interest in the work you're going to do to strengthen the Board of Ed's procurement program and property maintenance programs as well. So we're eager to learn more about that in the future. Alder Punzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you feel that 360,000 will, I think one of the important questions is with the cold weather coming, I guess we have to make sure that each school is working. Do you feel this company and this amount of this contract will be suffice to get all the schools safe for our children for the winter?
I think they'd be able to get most of them. Also, we have a contract coming forward on boilers as well. Now, also, if we got, 2 weeks, and there's still those ARPA funds out there, we're gonna look to get more so that we can do more work as needed on HVAC and boilers for the winter.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Punzo. Further questions for Mr. Carter on this contract? Further questions, Alder Festa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, it's just a note to add the 360 in the actual order.
Thank you for that, Alder Festa. We will definitely address that during our deliberations. I'm grateful that you pointed it out. Further questions for Mr. Carter? Seeing none, well, thank you for your time. We know that you have another meeting to go to, which is happening right at this moment. You're welcome to stay as long as you wish. But what we're going to do now is we're going to offer the public an opportunity to give comments on either of these first two items related to the Board of Ed. You might stick around for a little bit just in case there's a question comes up. Okay. We'll invite you to take a seat. Is there a member of the public here who wishes to testify on either item 1 or item 2? These are two contracts with outside firms and the Board of Education. And for a third time, is there a member of the public here who wishes to step forward and testify on either of these two items, or both? Seeing none, we're going to proceed now to item 3, which concerns the interdepartmental MOUs to obligate ARPA funds in accordance with federal rules and laws. And I see 3 people coming forward, so we have 3 seats. Works out perfect. As these folks are coming forward, colleagues, I want to just say a couple of words about this. We're really here to talk about a new mechanism. It's based on one we're familiar with, but it's agreement within the administration. And it's intended to help us meet some important deadlines that the federal government has put in front of us that we want to meet because we don't want to give the money back. And in our discussion this evening, we will no doubt get some information about allocations and projects that are ongoing. I have no doubt that that will raise colleagues' curiosity about the multitude of projects that are still ongoing. We are not going to be able to do a workshop on all of those projects tonight. there may be interest coming out of this evening's meetings in having more conversation about the progress of these projects. And so we will consider that for the future. But for tonight, I'd like us to focus on what's before us, which is this mechanism that is going to help us meet a deadline. I believe that the staff will give some examples to help put some meat on the bone and help us to understand what it is. And I invite them to begin.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Starting with names and addresses for the record.
Okay. Shannon McHugh. I am the budget director and at 95 Audubon Street. Department number? The whole address?
That's fine.
Yes, in New Haven. Allison?
Sorry, Allison Harrington, 932 Dunbar Hill Road.
Ron Busy, 219 Raymond Terrace, Hampton.
Please.
Okay, thank you for your time. Well, we're here to talk to you about the MOU that we had done, we had worked on in order to really, the idea of it was to ensure that we had enough time to use up all of the ARPA funds that we had according to federal rules. So there are rules in place, and we're going to get to those. But to start out, the city had received $115 million of ARPA funds, $90 million in direct allocations, and $25 million, which represents the county share. And there, were certain obligations and rules that came with that funding. And the first one was that there was an obligation deadline of December 31st, 2024. So that meant that all of the funds had to be obligated by this time in order to utilize them. And if not, there was some concern that the federal government could claw back some of those funds. So that deadline was coming upon us, and we realized that, it's not as easy as it sounds to spend $115 million. There's a lot of process in place and a lot of, quotes and bids and all sorts of things to get programs off the ground. So what we did, all of the funds have to be fully spent by December 31st, 2026. So we're in the process of doing that, but we wanted to ensure that if we, that we didn't miss that December 31st deadline for the obligation part of this. So, and I have the definition of the federal definition of obligation, which is defined as an obligation as an order placed for property and services, contracts, and subawards made and similar transactions that require payment. Essentially, an obligation occurs when a commitment is made to spend those funds. So what we put together was an MOU, which there's also a provision that says that if the entity that receives the ARPA funds were to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alice, but if they were to allocate those, say, to a nonprofit to do the work, that would buy them more time to spend down the funds. So when the city gave nonprofits money, that gave them more time to do that obligation piece. So what we essentially did is the mayor, the recipient of all of these funds, allocated those funds to various departments across the city. There's 13 different, programmatic areas where we included in the MOU, where essentially the mayor was making the city departments the sub-recipients, which gave them a little bit more leeway in obligating those funds and spending those funds down. Ron, as you all know, Ron Gizzi, runs the special funds out of the Office of Policy Management and Grants, and can speak in more detail about all of the, the details about how that structure works. And Allison worked very closely with the departments to make sure that we were including the right amount of funds in the MOU so that we could preserve those funds and give the departments longer to spend those down. Would you like to go into a little more detail on that?
Sure, so,
I'll just say real quickly, and thank you for that narrative, which was very helpful, but I'll just add one little correction, which is that the mayor proposed applications.
Yes.
Which then we approved.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
okay, so what that was, I was just gonna say that everything we're doing here does not change any of the previously approved projects from the board of alders. Again, this is just a mechanism to obligate the funds. Treasury is allowing us to do that. They're allowing the use of an interdepartmental agreement, which we're calling MOU, to obligate the funds. So everything that we're obligating, or the MOUs tonight is just obligating the balances, so we meet the December 31st obligation deadline. So it's a little complicated. We've spent a lot of time going through the regulations on this. We've been to webinars, so it's complicated. So basically that's what we're doing. So these MOUs are now establishing city departments as a subrecipient. So the city department can now contract out, which that will be the same process, same RFP process that we need to follow from Treasury, the city's procurement policy, all that needs to be followed. If there's going to be a multi-year agreement with another agency, Board of Alder approval is required on that. But again, this is just allowing us to go past that December 31st, 2024 deadline.
And just as a kind of a side note, we were not referenced this when we got the ARPA funding. It was just that we had to obligate as of December. There was no understanding of MOUs, there was nothing to that extent. And then they gave us kind of this leeway to be able to do this so that we can give the departments the ability to subcontract with the agencies and work within what you've approved as to how they're going to move forward with it. So this was kind of a quick short of being able to kind of work around their parameters, so.
And it is advantageous to the city.
Yes.
And other recipients of ARPA funding to allow this. I believe it was, March 29th, Allison, I think that's when they came out with it, with another final rule. They had a webinar a couple months later that we were watching, and it's good news for us.
Yes.
to do that, which was surprising.
And we work closely with a consultant as well, who gives us, we work very closely with them to ensure that we're following the letter of the law. Because the intent here is to give the departments more flexibility, because we don't want to give back any of the money in the federal government. We don't want to give a dime back. So we just wanted to create that scenario where we had that flexibility to do so within the letter of the law. Because the federal government likes to do look backs, and we want to make sure that we're following the rules as closely as we absolutely can.
And Corporation Counsel does have a dedicated attorney for ARPA funds, that he just does ARPA funds and that's it. So he reviewed that. Our consultants, Tetra Tech, they also reviewed it. So that meets all the federal, the Treasury guidelines, or Treasury regulations, not guidelines, requirements.
And then, so we did include some additional information in here as well. We did list the areas where the funds are being allocated, some of the top city priorities: community resilience, community service, economic development, engineering, fire, information technologies, OMB revenue replacement, parks, police, public safety, communication, vocational schools, and youth departments. So we're using it for all of, the city priorities to make sure that we're using the funds wisely and to move the city forward. Let's see, so I don't know if you want me to cover this one.
Because there are no page numbers on this
page
deck,
numbers.
that's all right. Just if you could show us what page you're on, so colleagues know. Thank you, appreciate that.
Well, I know that people, I'm sure you're around, but part of it was we thought that we should give some examples of how those funds were used and how these funds move the city forward. And the next set of slides, we talked about the process for allocating ARPA funds.
So that's this page here.
Which we went through together.
Yep. So that's there for your information. And then there's a couple of examples that we would like to highlight.
Okay, so the next page, this is just an example of the economic development allocation. And again, everything that's listed here are bullet points. Those were approved by the board previously. I think there were 4 or 5 maybe legislations that approved that. So again, not changing any of that. So let's go down to the last one on the list, facade program. So that was funded for $100,000. There is a $100,000 balance. So part of this MOU would obligate this $100,000 to economic development for the facade program. Okay, that covers us for the Treasury obligation, December 31st, 2024 deadline. So now after that deadline, we can put out an RFP, hire a contractor, and this will be a multi-year agreement, so we'll come back and say facade company XYZ, they have the bid, they won the contract, we'll come back to the board, multi-year approval, execute that agreement with the contractor. So that's one example of how this will work. Okay. Thank you for that. And that's exactly how it'll work with all the other projects. And then on the next page, we have some engineering projects, which include parks. Same thing, we have some improvements to some of the youth centers. So a lot of it we have spent, we have $787,000 left right now. Same thing, we'll have Trowbridge over down on, if there's a contract, we're gonna obligate this $787,000 to engineering, and then after the December 31st deadline, engineering will put out an RFP for a contractor, whatever they're doing, they'll have all that laid out, again, multi-year agreement with a contractor, come back to the board for multi-year approval.
That was our presentation, and we were happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation and the deck. And we're now going to take questions from colleagues. The queue is open. I'll just, before I take people on the queue, colleagues on the queue, I just want to remind us that we should focus our attention on the process and on the mechanism. There's undoubtedly many, many projects we'd like to have updates on. We're not going to do that this evening. But if colleagues are interested in particular projects, they should let me know, because we can do follow-up on that. So focusing on the mechanism before us and the process involved. So I see Alder Morrison and then Alder Punza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to make sure that I was hearing you right, so once you do the RFP after December 31st and you get the person or that contract in place, the particular service itself has to be done by the 2026.
Yes.
So you can't spend another dime of the ARPA money after 2026.
And what we're doing actually too, and we have it in here, we're shooting for, we're having an internal cutoff at September 2026, just for a closeout period, just in case. We don't know, most federal grants, they will allow a closeout period, sometimes 90 days, sometimes 180 days, usually it's around 90. Because if you're going up to December 31st, you may have an invoice on December 31st that's going to get paid in January. So we don't know if Treasury is going to give us a 90-day closeout period, so we're pushing that date up to September 2026. So we'll have a 90-day closeout period to get everything spent.
Okay, and so just again, for my own understanding, and just looking at youth centers in the 7, 8 classes, the youth center,
Yeah.
right? So, because when I hear contractors, RFPs and contractors, that's in my head, it sounds like there's a long service that you're going for. So this wouldn't be like service bound, like you center you have a program that now you have a dance program, for example, and this dance program, you're paying this person for 5 years, just making that up. You can't use the ARPA money for paying whatever for 5 years. You only can do it within that 2 year
Yes,
period.
so that's December 31st.
Okay,
So we do go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, so what you're talking about here just gives us 2 more years to get our stuff together.
Right, so we do have employees paid from ARPA funding and they will end on December 31st, 2026. One of the other things, like you were asking about, service, we have the Youth at Work program. And I believe I think we have 2 million that was allocated in the 2025 budget for that 2.5 years. That would be the same thing. That'll be an MOU. All those kids will be able to be hired through December 31st, 2026.
And like you said, it's not as easy to spend
Yes,
115
exactly.
million, even though in my mind, I can spend it up.
Oh, yeah.
But
But
there's
again,
too many
it's-
rules and regulations
Right.
around the way that you spend it, so I can get it. So,
Yeah,
okay.
So it is everything needs an RFP. That's part of the treasury rule. There are some exceptions, but most of it is all RFP. The other thing, again, multi-year agreements. That takes a little time to get through the Board of Alders. So we would not have enough time to do that before the December 31st, 2024 obligation deadline.
And thankfully with Treasury, if a contractor cannot continue based on performance or inability to, we're able to replace that vendor without having an issue with the funding or what have you. So at least they gave us kind of that purview of that as well.
So Mr. Chair, this is my own understanding about us. Say that did happen, do you have to come back to us? Because to me, it just sounds like there's a very short window here and we still have our process here. And so just trying to get an understanding.
So after 2024, if we had to remove the contractor, we're able to replace them. It doesn't have to be prior to that. It can be over the next 2 years. Just that they went out of business, they're not able to perform, what have you. It's up to the departments that are determining if they're performing to the best of their abilities.
And
So
we're
that-
just approving, generally speaking, we're approving this actual process. And
Correct.
once we did that, you guys, okay.
Yeah, and maybe a situation like that might be more of a technical question. If the contractor walks off the job or if he fails to perform, we're hiring another contractor. So it is a new contract, so that's more of a technical thing. Revisit that. Hopefully it's not gonna happen, but, again, that's something that would, technical that we could revisit later on.
Yeah. Thank you for that question, Alder Morrison. I think we should cogitate on that, and let's hope we don't face that situation. Further questions, Alder Morrison?
No, I get it now. Thank you.
Next on the queue is Alder Punza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How were the allocations determined? Did the department heads come before someone and say, I need this X number of dollars? Did they have to present, what they were gonna use it for? That's how it was determined?
Yes, and we did include the process for allocating ARPA funds. It's probably, I think it's like close to the back. Yes, yep. So the process for allocating ARPA funds is like an outline of how that occurred. It was before I started in my position, but Ron and Allison were very engaged in that process, and preparing the documentation and doing the analysis. But I perhaps should let you speak to that, Ron, if you were.
Sure. So again, everything did come before the board for approval. So there were presentations. I know it's been a long time now and there were quite a few, but everything did come to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Punza. I'll just remind colleagues that the most recent allocation we made was during our most recent budget vote. We reallocated funds from one project and committed a bunch of money to our revenue side of this current fiscal year's budget. So that's the most recent allocation that this body was involved in, but all of the allocations were approved by the Board of Alders. And there's been a couple reallocations as well along the way, which needed to be approved by this body. Thank you, Alder Punza. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification purposes, all the funding has been allocated. This is just a protection mechanism, so we are buying more time for ourselves in order to spend the money that has been allocated.
Yeah, just to meet that definition of obligated, the treasury definition of obligated.
Has any ARPA funds not been obligated?
I believe everything is allocated now with that last batch of in the 2025 budget. So everything is allocated now.
Most of them are in some state, they're in a state of progression. And you could see in the examples we gave, there were some examples where there's $2.4 million for the youth centers, but, we only included 757 because they've spent a good portion of it. And then there's some that are in the works, and you'll see the whole amount has been put into the MOU based on those samples. And those, they're working through that, and they're working hard to make sure that all those funds are spent. So it's an ongoing process. They still have to work just as diligently as they did before. We just got some cushion so that, we're not up against those deadlines.
We do push departments to spend the money and give us reports.
And we're very candid with the departments. We meet quarterly to kind of assess what their situation is with their various programs. How is it working? Is it still going to be moving forward with the amount of money that you actually need? Can you move it to something else? Things of that nature, so that we're understanding exactly what they're working with versus us just kind of being like at tail end of December 2024, being like, oh, well, where are you at with the program? So we're meeting with them quarterly as we're reporting to Treasury to make sure that they're actually able to successfully complete their programs. And we'll continue to do that as such moving forward.
Okay, and that was actually going to be my question. Is 2 years enough time to complete these programs? I'll take, for example, I'm going to pick on engineering just because I know that's a very, very busy department with very little resources where we can't get sometimes, mundane things done because they're so busy, not to their fault by any means. So I guess my concern is 2 years enough time for all of these departments to complete their projects based on these allocations? And I was picking on the engineering department, knowing how busy they are and looking at even all these projects, because some of them have been in the works since we allocated the money, which, we got this money 3 years ago. So, can you speak a little bit on that, and if there are any concerns? And
the engineering, every meeting we're in with them, they're confident that they will spend all the money. I know this allocation part was a big thing for them, but every meeting with Giovanni is confident that we will spend that funding.
And this is, I just took engineering as an example, but
yes.
with all the departments,
Yes.
They are confident that.
So it's not even being confident, it's more like a status update of where you're at in the process of RFP. Is there a sole bid or a sole source bid? Where are you at with this project? I think it was kind of hard with the feedback from Treasury of knowing what the parameters were of how we were able to move forward with this. And I think that being able to have candid conversations and saying, listen, if you don't think you're able to spend the funds, let us know and we can definitely work with you on that. I think it's moving forward now. It took a little bit of time based again on feedback from Treasury and guidance that I think that we're now moving forward. And I do feel with the MOUs that we are safe with where we're at. There may need to be conversations moving down the road of what that looks like in a year, not even, or 6 months. But I think that our conversations have been very candid with the departments of, listen, this is what we have. This is what you have to spend. What is your process and procedures, and how are we going to accomplish that? Because we don't, again, want to give anything back.
So speaking on that, what if they don't need all the money? What if they don't spend all of that money? Can it be allocated somewhere else?
It can be reallocated to existing projects. We
Okay.
cannot create a new project.
Correct.
So if one project, is really moving forward and they could use additional funds, they can be transferred if another area is having trouble spending down those funds.
And what is the procedure for transferring those funds? Does it have to come to us, or can it be done automatically? Or is it dependent on how much?
It has to
It
come
would
here.
be, with the board. That was another interim final rule that they have that did allow that flexibility as well, to move funds to existing only projects. No new initiatives, unless we have a new initiative before December 31st. Which is advantageous again for us.
So for example, with engineering, if the youth centers weren't using all of their funding, they could move that to building decarbonization or within the approved programs.
Within that department?
Correct. Correct.
So I guess we'll just keep picking on engineering. The total allocation was $14,069,257.25. The engineering department alone has to spend this much. If they have, let's say, that 25 cents left over, they can't give it to another department. Okay. All right, so they have to spend, engineering has to spend every penny of that 14 million, including that 25 cents. Okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Fester. Further questions from colleagues? I have you for the second time, just checking to see if there's any colleagues who want to go for the first time. Seeing none, Alder Morrison.
So just again, just to follow up, in regards to what Alder Festa said, that 25 cent that she just gave, that 25 cent can go, it can't go over, this is engineering, but it can't go over to facade.
We're gonna have to double check that. There are some other rules that we're gonna need to check on that.
Our belief at this time is it cannot.
Okay. So they better spend. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to, because there's so many moving parts, and then when you get to September, because that's my thing, when you get to September 2026, and then you find that there's still $500,000 that's not spent, even though it falls under different categories, they don't need it. Just what that process in a sense looks like, but it sounds like it goes back to our process where you're saying, look, engineering didn't need this 200,000, but facade does, economic development does. We want to transfer this and that comes with us. So it sounds like that to a certain degree.
To our understanding at this moment, because again, Treasury is very interesting in terms of how they're illustrating this, it has to be within the department. So again, we've had very candid conversations. If you cannot spend within youth centers, are you able to spend it within the eligible categories that you have? Again, in 2 months, could that change with Treasury? It could. Unfortunately, with their guidance, it changes almost
Daily?
monthly, if not, well, daily in the beginning, but yes, monthly. So we will keep you guys apprised of that, but that's our understanding at this current.
Thank you. Thank you for doing all this to make sure that we're getting the best thing for these bucks.
Thank you.
I'm good.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Alder Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair Marchand. So folks, okay, back to engineering.
Well, they're gonna be mad at me.
But, okay. Within the Department of Engineering, that's 700 and something thousand. It only, departmentally, they can only use it for services to youth centers. It could not be used for anything else other than youth centers, or unless it comes back to us. Am I clear?
Oh, right, it does have to come back to you. If we moved it, say, to building decarbonization, yes. it have to.
Okay, it has to be one of those allocated projects. So we couldn't give some to police department or any other departments?
We don't believe so at this time, unless we get further guidance. We are under, based on what our reading of the rules are and the consultants, we believe that it has to stay within the department. If that changes, we will certainly, make that known. But that's the assumption that we're working on, the understanding that we're working under now.
And you couldn't build a new youth center or anything like that?
I don't believe
I
so.
don't know if we have enough to do that, but.
So essentially why we're here for the MOUs is to protect the money within the pockets. So within the pocket of engineering, within the pocket of the police department. Now, as of December 2024, those are the pockets that are allocated and identified. We cannot move outside the pockets as we're aware of right now. Could it maybe change of, we didn't need money for a chair, but we needed money for a table. Those things that might be moved around within a youth center or within those projects, but again, it can't go interdepartmental at this point.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alder Hamilton. I think it's been helpful to understand what happens if things change. I would just add, from my perspective, that, you know, what we're talking about tonight, of course, is these interdepartmental MOUs. But before you get to that, you have an allocation that the Board of Alders has to approve. So if there is a proposal to reallocate funds into a different project that was not part of the original framework for which that was approved, then that would have to come before us.
Yes.
Including before the December 31st and including after December 31st. The MOU, if we give a favorable recommendation and the Board of Alders approves it at the second reading, but before the end of the year, there's a reallocation that's proposed, then the reallocation would have to come before us, and then a revised MOU would have to come before us, because tonight we're actually voting on 13 MOUs, which Don Hayden provided to us electronically. It was a big bunch of papers, so we didn't print them all tonight, but I reviewed them. They look very similar, just with different numbers and different department names in them. So now that there's this additional mechanism, if there are changes, there's potentially two processes that would have to happen. The allocation process, which is us, the administration proposes and we dispose, and sometimes revise. But then there's the MOUs, which if there's a change that causes a reallocation, then there would be two steps there. Potentially it could happen simultaneously, I believe, but we would need to vote on an updated allocation as well as a revised MOU, or maybe it's two MOUs that are indicated by the change. So, but the thing, we're supposed to be done with that MOU business by the end of the year. So unless they tell us that we can revise an MOU next year, sounds like we can't. So after that, it has to stay within the departmental pocket, as you said. Maybe it's the project pocket. So there's a little complexity here, but we want to make sure we do things according to Hoyle and don't get into the trouble with the feds and don't lose a single penny. I think the other thing the other thing I was going to say, I just completely forgot, so I'm not going to say it. Further questions from colleagues on this item? Alder Festival.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You just brought up the MOUs and how they have to come before us. Is there a certain amount that doesn't have to come before us? Or should we make it that all of these come before us?
So like interdepartmental MOU required to that the federal government is allowing us to do. I don't know that there's a section of our general code of ordinances that specifically addresses that. But my feeling is if the administration needs to change an MOU, then they need to get it approved by us.
Regardless of the amount that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. No, within an MOU, if a department's going to spend $1 over here as opposed to $1 over there, I don't think, because if you look at the MOUs, they give us a description of the projects at a certain level, but doesn't go into the sublevels, the sublevels, and the sublevels. So as long as the money's being used in a way that's in line and in accord with what the MOU says, there would be no need to change the MOU. But if there's a proposal to spend the money in a way that is not in accord with what the MOU says, then my interpretation would be that the MOU would need to be revised and approved.
The assumption we're working under.
Yeah, if it's outside the scope, then yes.
So it pays to look at one of those MOUs to see the level description that's given. A lot of it's legal boilerplate with, that frankly, the attorneys and the consultants help the staff come up with. But there is a section that talks about the department, the projects, and so it's a list of projects with dollar figures attached to it, like how much was allocated, how much is left. And so if anything is changing in that, then I think they would need to and bring it to us. So I'm sure it's the goal not to have to do that. But if a department says in 6 weeks, look, we're not going to be able to get there, and another department says, look, we could use some more money, it would be prudent to take action this year before this deadline for obligating funds to make sure that the money is going to be on track to being spent.
And when the MOUs are going to be executed, we are going to be having, again, those candid conversations of, are you going to be able to move this project forward? Because we do need that time frame to be able to come back to you as a board to be able to have that conversation. So we're being very candid and very open of listen, down to 25 cents, are you able to spend this money? Just because again, we don't want to give anything back. So we are making sure that we are keeping track and very on point with the fact that they do need to spend this money. The MOU exists, but that doesn't mean it's protected completely, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Further questions from colleagues? Seeing none, we thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
We invite you to stick around just for a few minutes to see if the public has any questions that we might call you back to answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
So, is there a member of the public who would wish to come and testify on this item? Is there a member of the public here who wishes to come forward to testify on this item? And for a third time, is there a member of the public here who wishes to come forward and testify on this item? Seeing none, we move forward to item 4, which has to do with change to the lease operating and funding agreement between the state of Connecticut and the city of New Haven. I believe our economic development administrator is here, perhaps the special counsel for the EDA. He's going to come forward. I saw him earlier. He was here. But that's the next item. Good evening. You have a presentation for us. 4 slides. Thank you. Let's take a moment to pass that on. While we're doing that, if you would give us your name and address correctly.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Michael Piscatelli. I'm the Economic Development Administrator for the city, and I reside at 353 Summit Street in New Haven. With apologies, our Council for Economic Development scooted out due to the time and family commitments, so I apologize they could not be here. And Michael Pinto, who's the council on this project, is on vacation this week. So, but I'll walk you through it and appreciate your time. Over many years on Union Station, this board, the city, our partners at the state of Connecticut navigated a way forward to reinvest in a facility that hadn't really seen a modernization in almost 30 years, right? And we navigated whether or not the city should take possession of it, the state going to take possession of it. We resolved a partnership, which was the 35-year lease agreement that was presented to you in 2021 and went into effect in 2022. And since then, we're very pleased to report a lot of progress. A $15 million grant was awarded to the state of Connecticut for the work that they're carrying out. A $17 million grant was awarded to the city of New Haven. You saw that and authorized that for work primarily within the station, doing the renovation projects at Union Station. The design contract is just about ready to be awarded. So start to see those changes take place. Perhaps most importantly, from a customer experience, people have returned. So I went back and checked the numbers. When we first presented this deal to you to take a chance on really continuing to operate the facility, we were down to about 400 cars per day that were using Union Station, which is the primary driver of the budget. So, the budget's about $5 million a year. It's primarily driven by the monthly people who show up every day, and then the transients that might be going for a volume or traveling. We're about double that now, almost 900 cars per day on average at Union Station. So really stable on the financial side of the house. And that's allowed us to make sure we have great security and customer services at the station. The place looks really, really good. So all that's in a really good place. The other part of the partnership was doing something, building a new development on the parking lot, creating more parking, renovating the whole place, make it a special destination, welcoming people to New Haven. So the first project out the gate, if you turn to page 2 of the presentation, is what we call the East Lot. Now that is the surface parking closest to downtown. So you go in, the garage is on your right and the lot's on your left. The lot's small, it's a little under 2 acres of land, 257 parking spaces, so nowhere near the totality of parking on the site. But that's where a new vertical development will go. It's a mixed-use concept. You saw the zoning for this earlier this year, so getting the zoning ready with the city's aspirations and development parameters from that were all approved by you. By state law, unlike the district, remember the district project we did in partnership with DECD, that follows one statute. With DOT, the statutes are much stricter in the way the DOT can release projects that aren't transportation specific. So they have their own set of statutes. So they put out the RFQ and the subsequent RFP, of which there are 4 respondents, and that RFP will close later this fall, so in October. But then they carry out the selection process. They do the development agreement pursuant to their statute, which leads us to today, which is we have to address the lot, which is in the lease with the city and operated by the parking authority. So the way we've navigated that is what we call Amendment 1, which is on page 3. And you can see the small blue area here is where the new development is going to go, this little blue lot. And so in navigating the amendment, we have to take this out of the lease so that they can make the development agreement, if you will. Some big things were on our mind. One was making sure that the development is carried out consistent with the zoning that we put together. The other is to make sure that we can still pay the bills at Union Station. Like we have to operate this place. So the amendment speaks really just to those 2 procedural steps. One is with Amendment 1, we didn't want to release the lot unless we knew something was going to get built on it. So we don't release it until the day the developer is ready to start construction. That's the word you see called custody, meaning that developer, not just the signing of a development agreement or the selecting of someone, but they're going to start construction. That's the day we release the lot. And then the second is there's a calculation in the amendment about the parking revenue. So we'll do a 12-month look back, and then the DOT is going to replace the lost revenue because we won't be having the parking revenue. We're going to need to still operate the place. And the way it works, the money actually goes into the controller's office here at the city, and we don't want to have a cash flow problem on our side of the house. So they're going to make monthly payments to us to make for the lost revenue. And that will continue until the new garage goes up on the west side of the facility, or there's some replacement revenue to make sure that we're always full operating the place. And then the other piece, which was the lease, is a fairly mechanical instrument, speaks to Union Station. But there were some things that weren't appropriate for the lease, but were very important to us. And so that's the side letter that I included as the supplemental material number 2. So the supplemental A and supplemental B was this side letter. And the big points in the side letter are building permits would go through the city, and all the building permit revenue for this new building goes through the city. Property tax, so you can't just, because you're the state, you can't make it property tax exempt. So whatever goes there will pay property tax to the city. So very important to make sure that that commitment is in place. No objection to a unionization of the hotel. Recognizing if a hotel is built there, we want it to be a place of distinction, so the city would be really proud of. It's a welcome mat location. So the DOT agreed to the no objection to the potential unionization of the hotel, and that would be a flow down to the developer as well. So not just to us, but this goes in the development agreement along with a commitment to pay property tax and the commitment to building permit revenue. And then the last piece, which, I can't conceive of this happening, but just make sure, we did negotiate a no compete clause such that, if the developer comes in and there's parking within the development, we don't want that competing with the parking authority. Like that revenue will also be operated by the parking authority. Otherwise, you're going to have this, really unfortunate scenario whereby the customer gets confused. You go here, you go there. So there's basically a no compete on parking such that any new developer can't come in and try to undermine us on rates or all that. But that's all on the side letter, which is this last page of the. That's a lot for what is pretty much a mechanical thing, but it addresses a goal that we've all shared, which is, do something really special here at Union Station. And the state has been a great partner in that. And I think we're excited that we're going to see something very consistent with what we approved on zoning previously this year. And so I'll pause there if anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Piscatelli. We appreciate your presentation. I'll just remind colleagues that the zoning that we passed was called the Transit-Oriented Community. It was a map amendment and it was a text amendment because it created a new zoning district, which at this time has implemented just in that location, although potentially could be implemented, say, near the State Street Station, for example. And that was this year that we did that. And it would require site plan approval as always, but also a special permit should there be a residential use or a hotel use, given that it's in the flood zone, just like we saw in the Long Wharf area, where we also have a special permit in there. And so, so that's just a little bit more information. The queue is open for questions from colleagues. Questions from colleagues on this item. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is just for clarification because we have an existing lease, but this was not included in the existing lease until we were sure what was going on that property. And so now we can amend it knowing what we want to go there.
Arguably, we probably should have had more of this tight the first time around. But part of that was DOT navigating its own statutes, and the DOT, when they started to work on the RFP, realized the guardrails of the statute that they work with. So that's what, arrived at doing it through the amendment. And in some ways, although if we had the foresight then, that would be one thing. I don't know if we would have been able to figure out the parking revenue and all of the sort of things that we negotiated in the amendment that actually, we would have never forecast, 4 years ago. So like the building permit revenue and making ourselves whole on non-compete and that stuff.
Okay, so the lease that you're proposing, or this amendment that you're proposing to the current lease, is only to cover what you just mentioned, the city property tax, the building code and permitting, developer, and no compete.
And the process by which we release the property, right? So, it's a physical demising. We have possession of this parking lot, and we don't release our possession of the parking lot until the developer is ready to go.
Okay. Great, Grant. Yeah. Okay. And what is the timeline for this? I mean, what if this is approved by the board by the second reading? Do we have everything in order to move forward? I know this has been a long coming project, and we keep hearing, different time frames. It's hearsay mostly, but do you have a timeline of when most of this will be accomplished?
So the RFP closes, and they'll have, the 4 respondents. I imagine all 4 will put something in a selection by the end of the year. Figure at least a year of due diligence coming back before City Planning Commission, building all of that. So, it's not conceivable that construction would start in 2025. But all things considered, given, we navigated a pandemic, the, interest rates got really, really high, which created lots of challenges for new development. A start date sometime in 2026 or early 27 is pretty heroic in this environment. So.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Further questions from colleagues on this item? Further questions from colleagues? Alder Punzo.
Mr. Piscatelli, I mean, just for my own knowledge, is this a lot across from the police station?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Punzo. Further questions from colleagues on this item?
I have a follow-up on that. I was confused.
Alder Rosa Farrar Santana, you have
Thank
the
you,
floor.
Mr. Chair. So this is the one across from the parking lot, from the police station, correct?
Correct.
Isn't there already parking there already?
Yeah, so that the 280 or so people that park there today, The plan is there'll be a new garage on the west lot, the other side where the buses are.
Yeah, with the buses.
And that's going into design.
So that one will no longer, when this becomes effective, whenever that is. So there will be no parking across from the police station, correct?
There may be a small amount of parking, but it'll serve the development. Everything
Oh,
else
okay.
for us, if you're, traveling to Union Stadium, again, say you're taking the train somewhere, you would park in the existing garage or the new garage.
But the new garage. Okay, thank you so much. I wasn't sure of that. Thank you. Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you, Alder Ferraro Santana. Further questions from colleagues? Seeing none.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
very
your
much.
time.
Thank you.
Very much appreciate it.
Is there a member of the public who wishes to testify on this item? Is there a member of the public who wishes to come forward and testify on this item? And for a third time. If you wish to come testify on this item, now's your chance. Members of the public. Seeing none, let's move to item 5, which concerns a title change and a transfer moving from the Recreation Department to the Parks Department. I see our Deputy CAO is coming forward. Name and address for the record, please.
Rebecca Bombero, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, 122 West Rock Avenue, New Haven, Connecticut. So I'm before you today to request a title change and the associated transfer to make the salary budget in the Parks Department whole. As many of you know, shortly after you adopted the budget, Bill Dixon, our longtime Deputy for Recreation, retired. As part of the restructuring of departments, some of the responsibilities of the old Recreation Deputy from when the Parks Department was both Parks and Rec remain at the Youth Department. So in thinking this, the administrative deputy, which we had requested but was not approved in this year's budget, it makes more sense for the department than the recreation deputy that would only be overseeing Lighthouse and the Ranger program. There's a division head that oversees that, so only overseeing one division as opposed to administration, which can oversee that division, but also support all of the administrative functions, so procurement, payroll, planning, has a higher use. They're substantially similar, so it's just picking the more versatile title to move forward with that. There is a slight dollar difference in the positions, so the amendment before you would transfer money from the other contractual services line to the salary account to make the salary account whole for it. We could have asked that we use lap salary from the position not being filled, but just to be respectful of this process and the multi-year nature of budgets, lap salary may not be available in the out years. So we're requesting the transfer of other contractual services to the salary line to make it whole. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bombero, for your presentation. Queue is open for questions from colleagues on this reclassification and the associated salary funding transfer. $3,800 or something like that.
Yeah.
So this position would be graded slightly higher than the existing.
It's just in a slightly different range, so the salary scales do not align perfectly.
Okay. Questions from colleagues on this ordinance amendment? Alder Fessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we have an organizational chart? It'd be nice to see an actual organizational
Sure.
chart.
It was the one that was presented within the budget this year, but I can get it to you again.
Okay, and no changes to that because
So the recreation deputy was kind of to the side. So what this does is it adds back the position we had asked for but wasn't funded to create that double silo effect. So one admin and one operations.
wait, there wasn't one and now we're adding? Is that what you just said? What are we doing? Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
So you guys approved 2 deputies for the re-envisioned Parks Department. One was the Recreation Deputy and one was the Operations Deputy.
Right.
The other proposed deputy is the Deputy of Administration and Planning, which is a more versatile title. So the one division reporting up through Recreation would also report up through Admin and Planning, as would the finance functions and the planning functions.
So in total, we do have 3 deputies.
There will only be 2 deputies.
But the
You only
newer-
approved 2 in the
Correct.
budget cycle.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that was clear because that's what I remember, but now you're saying 3 titles, but you're combining.
We had proposed 3 titles, you authorized 2, and due to the retirement and the recreation deputy, we're requesting that you authorize the planning and admin deputy in its place.
Okay, and one's from youth department?
So the recreation deputy under the pre-existing Parks and Rec had been at Parks and Rec. It moved over to the youth department and then moved back to the newly contemplated.
I mean, and those 2 departments technically work together as well.
So there's crossover between the functions. In the newly contemplated, the Youth and Recreation Department do community-based recreation, and the Parks Department will absorb that, or has absorbed back the ranger function, so outdoor recreation. So things like hiking and biking, the functions out at Lighthouse. So the gate attendants.
Now, does youth department though fall under CAO or CSA?
CSA. The recreation deputy moved to the reconstituted Parks Department, which is under the CAO.
And parks is under CAO.
Correct.
They cross paths. I mean, we're one city, we work together, but I'm trying to get this straight in my head. So we have CSA and CAO. The youth and parks somewhat cross paths and work together with some things. How does that work out with it being under 2 different departments?
So again, the reconstituted Parks Department contains outdoor recreation. So that is why the recreation deputy, which used to be at youth, is now at parks.
Yeah, this is
So it's already in parks.
correct.
So as of July 1, there were 2 deputies for the Parks Department.
Correct.
What we're asking is to retitle one
One
of
of
those
them.
2 that is now vacant.
Correct, but taking on some of the responsibilities of that recreation in the youth department. No.
Taking on the supervisory function of outdoor recreation.
Okay. And the youth department has their own.
They have 2 deputies at youth.
Correct, but it's just, okay. The overlapping sometimes gets a little confusing. Okay, so this position will just have more responsibilities than what we.
The title is more versatile.
Okay, so it's just a change of title. Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm gonna give this some thought.
Okay, Alder Festa, thank you for that.
Further questions from colleagues about this title change and the transfer to pay for the somewhat higher salary? Questions from colleagues, Alder Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Ms. Bonner, 3,800, that just covers the salary now, benefits and all that?
So the city is self-insured, so the benefits for a person, while we estimate them for special funds based on salary, are not necessarily governed by your salary. It's governed by your family makeup, if you're taking it for one person, 2 people, or a full family.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Hamilton. Further questions from colleagues? Further questions from colleagues on this title change and the transfer to pay for the incremental increase in budgeted salary? Seeing none, we thank you for your presentation. You might not want to move too far, because so far we haven't had very many members of the public come and testify. But maybe there will be. If you're a member of the public and you wish to testify on this item, please come forward. Do we have a sign-up sheet? Okay, so we have no sign-up sheet. So what you can do is just stand up and walk forward and come to the table, and that's how you can testify. Any member of the public wishing to testify on this item? Any member of the public wishing to testify on this item? And for a third time, is there a member of the public who wishes to testify on this item? Seeing none, we're now going to move forward to the two final items in our agenda, which both relate to the Holland Memorial Golf Course. I see our deputy CAO is back, and she can present on both of these items. And we have presentations to hand out. Elder Morrison, if you could help us out, please. Is it one presentation?
The one presentation.
No, I mean,
covers-
these two different files. Is it?
Yeah, one presentation.
Okay.
I figured it was quicker that way.
You're correct. Thank you. Why don't you give us your name and address for the record one more time?
So it's Rebecca Monroe, 192 West Rock Avenue, Connecticut. So I'm here today to present on two items related to the golf course. The first is the golf course operations contract, and the second is the fee schedule. We generally do these in concert because the fee schedule is incorporated as an exhibit in the contract. So the first time in probably 25 years, we're going to have a new operator out at the golf course. Our longtime operator is easing into retirement and was not, while we coaxed him to a couple of one-year contracts to get us through our development out at the golf course. He is ready to not come back, and when his other contracts expire, will be full-time retired. But we are quite fortunate in that the current general manager out at the golf course has decided to set up shop and was a respondent to our RFP. It was a competitive process, open to anybody to apply. And we have a very similar proposal. So obviously, golf is not coming back, but loft management is the new venture. The team before included Bill Harrison, the principal, who is retiring, Kyle Lockery, who is the general manager, Chris Ryan, the superintendent. We have been vacant at the Golf Pro for about the last 10 or 11 months. And we have not had a restaurant out there for quite some time. So the new team, Kyle Lockery, who is the general manager, will be the principal. Chris Ryan, our long-term superintendent, will be staying on. One of the reasons we're here before you early is so that we can get this contract executed and they can start to sign their contract with staff for the next season. So that would include a golf pro, but they've already identified a dining director, somebody with expertise in dining. And this is important because one of the things we heard from the neighborhood in doing this project is they really want a restaurant out there, someplace to be a destination, not just for the golfers, but for the community. So there will be a restaurant that will be operating 12 months out there. So the current revenue share is based off an 80-20 split up to 850,000. And then over that 850,000, it's a 30-70 split with 10% of concessions, but we haven't had concessions in quite some time. The new revenue share on the operator will be set at $1 million. One of the things on that threshold is, it absorbs the cost increases. So it'll be a 75-25 share, so a little bit more favorable on the city side, up to that $1 million threshold, and then it would be the same 30-70 split over that million. That would be for the first term, and then the renewal option we're already contemplating, so that would shift to 1 million and 0.1 as where this split shifts. And it will be 8% of concessions. Just because it is going to be year round, there is more risk in those months where the golf course isn't fully operational. So we'll smooth that out by doing 8% over the full year. So paying, getting a little bit less so that we can have that 12-month benefit out in the neighborhood. We just did a revenue proposal comparison. The new ship splits, what was proposed and what we negotiated. Keep us on pace with what we're seeing in terms of our revenue share. And then from that base, we'll grow over time. Again, it's a revenue share on the contract, so the better they do out there, the better the enterprise fund does. And again, the enterprise fund is self-sustaining, so whatever we earn from this contract goes back into operations out at the course, long-term projects, the facility we just got, and so forth. One of the things that is exciting about having a new contract is a new set of eyes. We're going to have a greater focus on youth engagement. It's one of the things, this is actually our third review of this proposed contract. First, it's the Golf Course Advisory Board, then the Board of Parks Commissioners. So similar to you all in your legislative agenda, youth was a big focus, and that is going to be one of the focuses that you'll see both in the proposal, but also in the fee schedule. And one thing has changed in the last several years. There's a lot more technology out there and a lot less need for meeting in person. So one proposal was to use what was to be a meeting room in the golf locker room / pro shop building and convert that into digital golf. So digital golf gives people the opportunity to use the simulators, which is a revenue stream, which will be subject to the cost share or the revenue split, but also will keep the course active year round. One, to help with the restaurant, and two, have a reason to have eyes out there 12 months of the year. It increases security and the maintenance on the facility. Obviously, I've stressed the 12-month restaurant many times. And one other change, just because it's been a while, we're changing the threshold for capital improvements. So the operator is responsible for maintenance and low-level improvements. We're changing that threshold from 5,000 up to 10,000. So those projects would come to the city for the enterprise fund to fund. So now that threshold would be 10K instead of 5K. And happy to answer any questions, or I can roll into the next item and then answer questions in as a whole.
Why don't you roll into the next item?
So as per our tradition, we review the fee schedule whenever we review operations. That is a market analysis that's conducted by the operator, or in this instance, the proposed operator, and then recommendations to the Golf Course Advisory Board, the Parks Commission, and the Board of Alders to set the schedule, which is what we authorize to be charged out at the golf course. So the last time we did the fee schedule update was about 2 years ago in one of our renewals. So within your packet, you have the analysis of the related courses, but what basically before you is about a $2 per round increase in each of the next 2 years. Just because of the changes and fluctuation in the market, it's only a 2-year proposal for a fee schedule instead of the full 5 years of the contract. So we'll be back in those out years for review again. It adds a rate for the simulators, and then it does some technical changes to the rules to allow some changes on how those fees are charged. So the junior had previously been defined as anyone who was under 17 years of age. This is going to amend that definition from anybody 13 to 17. Thus, children under 13, so 12 and younger, can play for free with an adult. So if a parent or a grandparent wants to teach their kid how to play golf and get them engaged in the game, they can now bring them for free. It's a good positive opportunity, encourages youth participation. And one of the things they see out about the course a lot, which is consistent with what we do in ordinance in terms of our procurement and our residency, our preference points for hiring, is a benefit for veterans. We don't have that in our current code. So what this would do is establish a veteran rate, so basically the junior rate, the senior rate, veterans, and they added in first responders. So they would all get that discounted rate. So saying junior rate, senior rate, veterans, and first responders would all pay that discounted rate. And then twilight rate, the definition had previously been 6 p.m. One thing we find, especially during daylight savings time, 6 p.m. is kind of early. During the strata season, spring and fall, it's not that early. But what this does is it redefines, brings back the twilight rate, so a discounted rate for that very end of the day, but changes the definition for it to be the later of 1.5 hours prior to sunset or 6 p.m. So basically, it generally takes about 2 hours to play golf. This way, if you're coming at the end of the day, you want to get on, you get to golf until you can't see anymore, and you get the discounted rate. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. We appreciate it. Now the queue is open for colleagues to ask questions. I see Alders Morrison, Ferraro Santana, and Punza. Alder Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This sounds really good. You're almost making me want to go learn how to play golf. But my question is, I've never been at the golf course, never played. Is there New Haven residents, just like when you go to Lighthouse Park, there's a discount? If you're a New Haven resident, do you get, do they fall under this discounted rate that you?
So there's resident and non-resident rates for all of the categories. So there's resident junior, there's resident season pass, resident seniors. One thing to note about the golf course, because of the bequeath and the location, in ordinance, resident is defined as anybody living in New Haven or East Haven. Because when the parcel of land was deeded to us, which exists mostly in East Haven, that condition was set. But thankfully it's an enterprise fund, so the money generated there supports the enterprise and not our tax dollars.
So, and with any of these proposed changes, is there, outside of what you just talked about with the children and the veterans and all of that, there's nothing else that's?
So across the board, there are increases. I can go through them in general, but as part of your packet, there is the notated document. So the changes are consistent between resident and non-resident. So if a resident's going up $2, the non-resident's going up at least $2. One thing to note, the new fees for the simulator do not make a distinction between resident and non-resident, and that's just due to it being more of a pro shop type of item.
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Alder Ferraro Santana.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like what's happening at the golf course. I've seen it, I've driven by it. I like the improvements, especially on the road. Thank you very much. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity for youth to be engaged in this, because we've always talked about it, but I don't think we've ever really pushed it, and I'm hoping that we can. 12-Month Restaurant, they used to have a hot dog thing that they used to use, and that was many years ago, and I think that was almost 20 years ago. And they sold all that off because there wasn't anybody to run the restaurant anymore. So I think it's a great opportunity to have a restaurant there, seasonal holidays.
Alder Ferraro Santana, do you have a question?
Yes, I'm just thinking.
Well, so think a little bit more, and when you have a question, I'll let you get back on the queue.
Oh, okay,
All these wonderful comments are really good, but they really ought to be in our deliberations.
I'm sorry.
So when you have a question, let us know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder
I'm all
Ferraro.
set.
Alder Punza.
Okay, I do spend time at the golf course. When is this new pay rate going into effect?
So it would go into effect for January 1st for those who buy their season passes very, very early. But when the course opens in 2025, I always have to pause because it's crazy to think that's next year. So when the course opens next March, these would be the rates.
Will the restaurant be done by then?
The city engineer is confident that we will have substantial completion this winter, such that everything will be ready to open on beginning of March next year.
If it's not ready, I don't feel you should increase. There's no amenities out there. There really is no amenities out there. I mean, you go there, there's a trailer, there's bathrooms, porta potties. I mean, they do a great job. The course is in great shape. There's some things that I'd like to see different. But, to raise, and you're talking about $2, but $2, to play costs me, as a senior resident, cart and 18 holes, it cost me $45 to play. How does that compare to other courses? I really don't know. So what I'm saying is that if the amenities are complete, I think the increase should occur. If the amenities are not complete, then I think that the increase should not happen until the amenities, pro shop, restaurant are complete. The other thing, I'm sorry.
Well, so interesting point. Let's make that a question.
Okay.
Is that something that you and the committee talked about? The timing of the increase and whether or not it should wait until these improvements are complete?
So one thing that's difficult in any rate structure is to change it mid-season. So one thing to note in the comparative document that was in the backup material, the fare increase proposal, the rates that we're proposing are still below all of the comparable market rates with the exception of Hunter Golf Club. And most of the other courses don't actually offer senior rates. So that's one thing that we do that the market does not make a distinction on. So even one other thing to note is current, supply and demand is one way to analyze if your rates are too low. If I was to try to book today for a weekend tea time 2 weeks from now, I couldn't find a time. Our rates are below market, and the demand exceeds the supply.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have one more question.
Please.
Yeah. As far as who is in charge of the golf course now? Is it the new company?
So the current company, New England Golf, is responsible for the course. The new company will include several of the folks that are on staff at New England Golf.
Now, if there are repairs to be made to the course at this time, who is responsible for that?
So maintenance level repairs would be the operator. So if there's a divot, if they're cutting grass, if there are any capital upgrades, $5,000 or more, the operator would then come to the city for authorization through the Golf Course Advisory Board to spend out of the infrastructure fund that is established through the enterprise fund.
So if the golf course needs sand for the sand traps, which they don't have, where would they go for that? They would have to do it themselves, or they have to put in a proposal? Because I don't know how expensive that would be. Because what's happening now is that there's no sand in the sand traps. They made the grass grow around the traps. Going into a sand trap is a penalty as it is, okay, on a normal course, golf course. But what I'm saying is that, can they do that now? Have they asked for that? Have they been denied?
So the Golf Course Advisory Board recently authorized the purchase of a couple new pieces of cutting equipment, which will address all of the edging around the sand traps. Some of it's quite specialized equipment. One of them has a reasonable lead time, so we would actually expect delivery this fall. Steve Layton is here. He's placed the orders, so we can get an update on that. In terms of expected delivery time. Once it's recut and retrimmed, reestablishing sand would fall under that $5,000 threshold. But there is a proposal that will likely be considered by the Golf Course Advisory Board later this year, once a fee schedule is set and we can do a projection on revenue more confidently. that would upgrade some of the sand traps, because the sand traps have not been upgraded since 2004 or 5, the last major course repair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Punzo. Further questions from colleagues? I see Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just while we're on that conversation, I'm not a golfer. I know people who are, not me, but it sounds like we have an incomplete golf course from what I just heard from Alder Punzo with the sand pit. Is that what it's called?
Sand trap.
Sand trap. So if it's not a complete golf course and construction is still not complete, yet we want to increase these rates, I think we should hold off on that until we have a complete golf course. I mean,
So is that,
That's
you
a-
asking, do you want to respond
yeah,
to that?
kind of, so, yeah.
Deputy
Yeah.
Umber?
So we're in construction on the clubhouse and restaurants. The courses are complete. They are playable. There are some debates around the sand traps. We do have some challenges with irrigation right now as well. There are new pumps on order for that. But again, supply and demand, because we are seeing the highest revenue from rounds because we are selling out of rounds. You can't manufacture more tee times. So we know because of that our rates are either competitive or below what they should be. And if you look at the comparative analysis, our proposed rate increases get us in line with what the rates are at these comparable courses today. More than likely, they're all going to be increasing their rates for next season as well. So again, we'll be below and competitive in the market.
Now, when you say they, are they public golf courses or private that the public can play at?
It's a combination thereof. They're all courses that you or I could call and book a tee time on.
So some could be private, but the private ones are probably going to be higher anyway, so we should probably exclude them.
But they're still our competitors. So if you or I could call and make a tee time, whether it's operated by a municipality or, Joe member of the public, who's making a full profit off of it, they're still our competitive. And where we make the difference up is in our resident rates. That's why it's a public course.
And comparing the public with the private, do the private have all the amenities that golfers are looking for?
Varying, levels. Hunter has some, it's all different no matter where you go.
But they offer, if golfers want to get a drink after a round of golf, there's a place for them to go to, whereas right now we don't have that. We're working on it.
So we currently only have, my vending machine level concessions, which is, there are some other courses out there that only have that. What we had before we went under renovations was a slight step ahead of that. As Alder Santana put it, it was the hot dog cart within a building. But what we're going to have is a really nice restaurant.
And so what are we looking at when we see other golf courses? What are their rates compared to us? Is it, so it was determined to go from 21 to 23.
In your packet, I can make a copy of what didn't come across as part of the submission. I tried not to copy things that were part of submissions. It was not in the PowerPoint I did because it was part of the submission packet.
Yeah, which we have
but
online, not printed,
yeah.
But we have it.
Everybody
But
is
just
trying to conserve paper, but we do have
to put it on the record,
a fee comparative.
Yeah.
So we'll use a non-resident, noting that resident rates are generally $2 to $4 cheaper in all these categories. So they're only senior rates at two of our competitors. That would be Orange Hills and Hunter Golf Course. So we're currently at $19 at Ailing for a non-resident senior and $29 for a 18 on a weekday. At Orange Hills, it's 25 and 41. At Hunter, it's 18 and 29. So we're very competitive with Hunter. On weekends, that same rates. So across the board, we're at 24 right now. Laurel View's at 35. Traditions is at 44. There's two Traditions apparently. Traditions Oakland is 44. Traditions Wallingford is 39. Orange Hills is 30. Lyman Orchards is 24. Lyman Orchards Jones is 45. And then Hunter is 27. So we're below a lot of the things very locally. And then to find another truly public course, you've got to go all the way up to Hunter, which I think is Meriden.
It is.
So not very close.
Okay, so when the board met and they determined these fees, was it, hey, let's just go up $2, or did you really look into, I mean, you have the comparisons, but they're all over the place.
So yeah, we adopted the proposal before us. A lot of the debate actually was around our season pass, which we haven't updated in at least the time I have been presenting you guys the season pass rates. So what we did on the season pass was moved it so that the break-even point was about halfway through the year, as opposed to apparently the break-even point now is sometime in late April, early May.
If we were to not go up in these fees, what would our, total enterprise fund be? Would we be losing out on anything, or just maybe a little dent that
So
is still covered under the enterprise fund?
the enterprise fund would not see a loss in revenue, but we would not see as robust of an increase in revenue. So we estimate over the next 2 years that this proposed fee schedule would generate approximately $80,000 in additional revenue for improvements on the course, upgrades to those sand traps, and other, state of good repair. It's not going into the general fund. Anything that we produce goes right back into, upgrading our golf courts or upgrading the sand traps for the rainy day so that we can make bigger improvements down the line.
And that 80K more, does any of it go back to the contract?
So again, it is a revenue share. So our revenue share is set at a percentage split up to the $1 million threshold, and then a split above that threshold, which is more towards the favor of the city and the enterprise fund. So the additional rates would be in that above the line.
Is that 75-25?
Yeah.
So we would get 25%.
We would get 75%
75%
of everything we see from this fee increase, which would then go into things like carts.
Okay. And just one more question. This might be a little, anyway, you mentioned that the property is deeded to us from East Haven, and we offer these.
It wasn't from East Haven, it was from a farmer, but the majority of it is in East Haven, so the benefit goes to both sides.
Right, so the East Haven residents get the discounts that New Haven residents get. My question is, does East Haven help participate in any of these cost structures?
Again, the course itself and the revenue generated at the course pay for everything soup to nuts.
Right, but we put capital funds in for construction.
The last capital enterprises paid, the notes are paid out of the enterprise fund.
Okay. So basically,
Pays for itself.
Correct. I just remember we had capital dollars, I think, for the construction.
Yes,
that we approved.
it has to be approved as a general obligation bond, but then it gets.
Reimbursed by. Thanks for that clarification. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Vesta. Further questions from colleagues on this item, these two items? One being the new contract with the new vendor, and the other being the proposed revision to the fee schedule and rule changes. Questions from colleagues? Seeing none, thank you very much. Don't go anywhere. We may call you back if questions arise that we would like to follow up with you on. Is there a member of the public who wishes to come forward and speak on this item?
please have a seat and give us your name and address for the record.
I am David Belowski. I am the president of the Parks Department, and my address is 34 Oliver Road.
Please.
The bunkers are in great need of repairs, and they should be repaired. It takes a lot of money to repair the bunkers and bring in sand. Almost $1 million. Okay, the bunkers have to be redone and the sand has to be brought in. I am really adamant at getting the building finished. We started before COVID, and I heard that because of COVID, the costs skyrocketed. I could understand that. I get thousands of questions about the building. I mean, it's really, it's a great asset for the city. And we're treating it like it doesn't exist. I just think Giovanni has told me 3 times it's going to be ready 2023. Now he says it's going to be ready 2024. Is anybody concerned about it? You know, he covered up the building. For 2 months, the coverings were off the building and rodents or anybody couldn't come in the building. It's like it's in the spot that no one looks at. Everything is getting more expensive now. Do you know the cost to fertilize the course has skyrocketed? I want to go up $4. We have the best price for the condition of that course. The greens are the most beautiful greens, and people are playing the course. You know, you can't get a tee time. The price is the lowest price around. When you go to Orange Hills on the weekend, you pay $73. Our course on the weekend is like $54. Everything is going up. You could raise the out-of-town rates $4 and keep our rates at $2. We have to pay for the employees. We have to pay top dollar to keep the course in great shape. We're not compared to a private course, okay? Private courses, you pay $20,000 initiation fee, and then you get cocktails, you get parties, you get everything. This is a public course, and what we compared it to were other public courses. You go daily and you pay for golf. That's what our course is. I hope I don't want to take any more of your time. I appreciate your time, Mr. Chair. Anybody have any questions for me?
So, Mr. Belowski, we'll take it from your testimony that you're in favor of the rate increase, although you might encourage us to increase it more for non-residents.
It should be increased more.
Questions for Mr. Belowski? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony.
Appreciate all the work you're doing. Thank you.
Any other member? Yes, if you could write your name down, it'd be grateful. I see another gentleman coming forward. Because we don't have a sign-up sheet, after members of the public have finished their testimony, it's very helpful to write their name down for our staff. That's a very helpful step. Name and address for the record.
Joseph Hamilton, 90 Livingston Street, New Haven, Connecticut. Just want to address the issue that Boozer brought up, is that I don't think, I think the rate should be increased, but the fact that it's buildings and there's no amenities there, it's been for the last 4 years, you can't get a cup of coffee in the morning, can't get some after you finish. I don't think the rate should be increased until the buildings, all the buildings are done. And there needs to be a deadline from someone in the city saying when the buildings will be done. And it's gonna be done by March of next year, then the rate should go up by March of next year. But if it's not gonna be done by then you're gonna have a problem, because if the contract says rates go up in March, the building's not done, so you're gonna go 2 years with the same rates that you have now. I totally agree that the rate's gonna go up, should go up, $2, $4, a little much, saying that in the next 2 years, they're gonna go $2 anyway. Everything else that's been said, I play it there all the time. The bunkers, like you said, penalty wise, bunkers in bad shape. You get into the sand trap, the top, the heather, whatever you want to call it, so you're being doubly penalized. That's all being said because they don't have machinery to cut around the top of the bunkers, which they said they purchased. Hopefully we'll get that before the end of the year to show that to show the patrons of the course that something is being done for the top of sand traps. So it would make less hassle, more play, more pleasure. So that's all I have to say. Like I said, I agree with the rate hike, but with the despair of the buildings and being promised everything for the last 4 years, that's going to be a period and nothing's happened, it is kind of disappointing. So I just feel that, we need to get all our eggs in one basket and get this whole thing rolling, because it is a prized piece of property, and it could be, the 12 months that they're gonna be open, it's gonna benefit everybody. The more revenue the golf course gets, the more revenue the city gets. So it's a win-win situation for everyone.
Thank you. Any questions for this gentleman? Seeing none, if you wouldn't mind writing your name down for Don, we appreciate your testimony. Other members of the public who wish to testify on this item? Other members of the public who wish to testify on this item? And for a third time, any member of the public wishing to testify on this or any other item that we've heard this evening? Seeing none, Alder DeCola, well, hold on just one moment. Okay. Any follow-up questions that colleagues would have for Deputy CAO Bombero? Any follow-up questions for her? Please come forward. Alder Morrison.
So, Ms. Barbero, you said that it's hard to change the fees mid-season. Mid-season is, what is it? I don't know anything about golf.
So
what is the season?
Yeah, as per ordinance, operations must exist from the at latest April 1st, but we aim for early to mid-March. It all depends on when the snow melts. And it runs through at least November, and based again on whether you can go through to December. Some season ticket holders will start purchasing at the beginning of the new fiscal year. So March would be the absolute latest we could adopt a schedule, but for season ticket purchasers or season pass purchasers, the rate should be in effect prior to that.
Prior to March. Okay. And if, say we decided not to vote for the $2 hike now, then you guys will continue on the same fee schedule that you have right now. Well, I don't know. Is that the fee schedule? Is the fee schedule it doesn't sound like the fee schedule is just about the money. It sounds like the fee schedule is about the money in the different categories.
So the ordinance amendment before you has both the fee increases and the definition changes. One, which would allow youth under 12 to play for free, and then establishing the the veterans and first responders into that same discounted category as the youth and seniors.
So does that make so say we voted on half of it to give for the kids and, the veterans, and we did that, but we did not do the $2 increase. This is my issue. Don't go up on my price and you haven't done anything. If you at least gave me a cart out there and I could get some coffee, that's a new thing. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, they must be paying this person a whole lot of money to be out here. So it justifies it to me. I don't see, after listening to the testimony, there's no justification. Later down the road, the justification, we have all this new stuff, all these different things. So what happens if we decided not to vote on the $2 increase, however, vote on the other stuff that allows for the different categories, and then you guys come back once the building and all that other stuff is done? How does that affect the city, the people that go, and whomever goes?
So the fee schedule does get incorporated into the contract, but it does include the language as approved by the Board of Alders and amended from time to time. So while we would prefer to have this settled before we enter into a contract, it also will allow us to use the projected revenue from those fee increases to authorize additional upgrades. So we're holding off on decisions on proposals like Sandtrack upgrades until we know if those increases are coming, because we can't project on those future revenue if we don't have that updated fee schedule. So the longer it delays it, that we're using the current fees and the current projections in making those decisions. Again, we are here ahead of time. I know you guys usually see things last minute. We did come early as we have the new operator coming in and have to make staffing decisions. I've done fee schedule with you guys as late as November in some instances, with still getting in time for that January start.
So I guess the piece to me from what it sounds like, if we don't say yes to the $2 increase, there won't be there's no movement around any amenities. You can't get a truck out there to give people coffee or anything because you don't know, because we haven't said yes to this
So
$2
the large scale capital upgrades for the clubhouse and the restaurant are already funded. We did have some construction related delays due to supply chain issues. We also found some really pesky termites when we started construction, so that kind of put everything to a screeching halt as we needed to redesign some things around that. So it is taking a lot longer than we had hoped. We could try to identify food carts to get out there if we get into the winter and have some other surprise in construction, which we don't anticipate. We're very optimistic to be cutting a ribbon from the beginning of next season. But again, the rules are the most important part of it, because it does establish those new categories. The other thing is establishing a fee structure for the simulator, because that is new and there are no rates for it. If you don't propose any changes in rates, we just go back to what we currently have. But in instances where there are no rates, we don't have anything.
Right. So again, looking at the people, because when I think of golf, I think about a lot of retirees. And as Alder Punto said, he spends a certain amount of money, right? He's a retiree. But he's not getting, at this moment today, he's not getting anything for his extra $2. And even though $2 may sound like not a lot for people who work every day, and even is a lot for people who work every day. But for retirees, I think that can be a lot, especially if they utilize this as their thing, right, that they do. So I just wanted to get more of an understanding if we as a board decide, and I don't know what people are gonna do, but if we as a board decided not to go with the increase until you come back and say, yep, stuff is done, amenities are a little better, here's some coffee out there, and then we say, okay. So it doesn't sound like it's gonna hurt her, it sounds like it's just not in place for you, so.
I mean, the one thing, just because of supply and demand, one thing that is impacted by being below everywhere else in the market is the increased demand at our course. So if we're still well below market and if the prices elsewhere go up further, then that demand is only going to increase and it will continue to be hard to get those tee times. And then of course, the course, like everybody else, has the cost drivers, making sure that they're paying their staff a livable, competitive wage. As Mr. Gillespie said, the cost of maintaining, buying the chemicals and the equipment. I mean, for PD's sake, one of the lawnmowers costs like $80,000 that we just had to order. So there are demands on that side as well.
I get it, but if I don't see that stuff, that's like an insurance policy. It costs a lot of money. I don't see it. So I just wanted to get, I asked my question. I asked my question, so thank you.
Since there was starting to be a back and forth stuff. Okay, thank you, Alderman. Further questions from colleagues of our Deputy Alder Festa?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. First question is, when is the contract signing due date? When do you have to sign a contract with the new vendor?
So the contract goes into effect January 1st. The sooner that we can execute that contract for the January 1st start date, the sooner they can start to recruit for key positions like golf pro, where you want to find somebody really qualified and, onboard them and have a, great lead up to that March 1st start.
So we need to make a decision, obviously, before January 1st on this fee structure.
The fee structure helps with the contract and all projections,
right.
But is not essential. The contract, you have two things before you. One is an ordinance amendment, which requires 2 readings. The other is the operator's agreement, which the sooner we do, the sooner they can start recruiting staff and building the team for January 1st.
Okay. So what will be affected if we didn't vote on this increase? I mean, there's other things like the simulator you said that would be affected by this because that's a new item.
I think I just want to intervene here because really, if we don't change anything, the current fee structure will be what it is. If we decide to change some things, but not others, then the new fee schedule will be the current structure plus whatever we change. So I think for us, we should take a moment and reflect and during our deliberations, talk about what changes we agree with and we're, as a committee, ready to recommend to the full board, rather than holding off on taking action and waiting for a while. I think it's better for us to make a decision, make a recommendation to the full board, and keep the process moving. And so in deliberations, we can talk more about which revisions we agree with and want to recommend and which ones we don't.
Yes, and that's why I'm asking which ones are the newer items that we.
She's already described what those are.
And I want to make sure that, which is what, just the simulator?
There are no cart fees for simulators. Strangely, the cart fees were not spelled out as visibly as they should be, so we're updating that. And then the rule changes. The rule changes are new to allow that, children under 12 are free.
Right. Okay.
And first responders and veterans.
Okay. Now, I think the main concern that at least, some of us have voiced is unless the amenities are definitely going to be done by March, it's really hard to digest the rate increase. The restaurant, whatever, we're going to be hitting winter. Where do we realistically stand with this?
It seems that
Oh,
our
look who's
chief
here.
of cities engineer is going to come and address that question.
Well, it was, proposed by the public. It was proposed by committee members as to the concern of the construction.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm the city engineer, 95 Soundview Terrace. We had a lengthy discussion about this actually at the Golf Course Advisory Committee meeting, which I believe the gentleman who testified were also in attendance. We are right now scheduling to the end of the year on substantial completion, knowing that there's a bit of 2 months there of lag in the schedule until March when really the season gets started. So, we fully anticipate usage of the buildings during the next season, which is what you are setting fees for. And, I think it's, to some of Becky's points, getting ahead of it now and setting expectations now for next year is important to do rather than try to somehow time everything to happen as soon as we open the doors on something or something like that.
Okay. And just so, I don't know how much you heard of the conversation we were having. We want to make sure that all the amenities are put into place if we're going to vote on these price hikes. If they're not, then we don't see the justification. So
I think just to be fair, there's a couple of colleagues who've expressed that sentiment, but we haven't deliberated yet, so we may have different opinions. But I think the key thing that we wanted was the best assurance we could get from, and that would be from you.
Yeah.
About the level of confidence the city has about the completion of those projects by the beginning of the next season.
Yeah, no, that is very much something we talked about again in detail at the Golf Course Advisory Committee meeting, and we are working hard right now to do that. We uncovered a bunch of nasty surprises when we demolished the building, and then there's a long period of contracting for all the different pieces of it, and we're through all that. And so, it's an opportunity now to really kind of go downhill and get this done, get it off our, get a great amenity for the city back online.
And what is there now? I mean, is it an empty hole or do we have a standing building?
Well, the building's there. Okay. They're putting in ductwork, I believe, starting now. We've got all the plumbing roughed in. There's a bunch of utilities that have been run that we've, I think, changed the, some of the parking lot configuration. We've ordered, windows and doors and all that kind of thing that have to get changed out. As soon as those go in, then we put the new siding on. Both buildings have new roofs on them. So there's been a fairly large amount of work that's been done today.
Okay. And I only ask those because if we have a structure that with winter coming, a lot of it is indoor work.
Correct,
that needs to be done. Okay. And thank you for that. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Feston. Any further questions of our staff before we move on? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all. And last call, any member of the public wishing to testify? Seeing none, Alder DeColo.
Chair, I move that we close the public portion of this meeting.
Second.
Motion's been made to close the public portion of this meeting. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The motion passes. We are now going to take a 5-minute comfort break because I, as chair, need to excuse myself for 5 minutes. But we'll be back and we'll deliberate. Thank you.
Virus. Fairly clear stuff Thursday last week. Oh, yeah, it felt like someone was chopping on his apartment for about 3 days. That was fun.
Not at the moment.
I left a text. If I called you, I didn't leave a message, so I just texted you. So the.
Actually, talking about all this thing,
Are some of the lights are out?
yeah, they're trying to turn something on. I actually
Yeah, that was my.
It's, oh, there's plenty of light. There's a handful of issues. I know.
Sending text snapshots, and I'm not being responsive. After, and I'm like, who is this person? Because I went in to see if they left me an email. They didn't even leave me an
Those
email.
are the headings of what problems. Court as bright as they want.
Yeah, so anyway, that.
I mean, when they work, oh my God.
Oh my God, and a headache, get you 800?
Great, just got me.
That's like the best.
I got that, I'm pounding that amoxicillin. I got a dose coming up here tonight.
Strong. I really like that.
Oh, no, it was fun, yeah. It was pretty bad.
Yeah.
The baby and I spent a couple days together, because he was messed up. And he was waking up and trying to clear it on, take 10 minutes, like scrub it on, get him on. Massive. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I had a sinus infection and fever.
Oh, you had that too? Your eyes are closed?
Well, my eyes weren't closed, but I looked like, I had very red eyes and they were all small and puffy. So, unfortunately, on Zoom, you can't see that too much.
You were still, you were still doing Zoom.
Choice.
You do.
So, I took 6 days, but it, I wasn't on Zoom, you know? So, anyways, all right, so Henry, I thought I replied, but maybe I didn't, so I will make sure to do that. Gentlemen, and I'll provide Jules a.
Gentlemen, just so you know, we're recording.
And then for some reason, they don't turn it on.
Does he already know that he is not the chosen one? It was just.
Today, let's try like Thursday this week.
Feels like, they might get a little disheartened. I know. When there's a process and, maybe.
We talk on a regular basis, so I think, once I get to, this isn't the first time around, too. He was interviewed. Yeah, he was interviewed.
So they just twice a go over for,
But he was always on, scoring,
Yeah.
sometimes I think, we want to still give them as much opportunity as possible. I'd like to speak to like, between these and the other candidates.
All right, so that will be Thursday the 12th.
do broach the news once it's finalized, if we confirm that people accept the offer. Once I do, I'll talk.
Yeah, don't want to get sidelined, well, oh, I got to do something else on the job, and you know what I mean? I'll find
Yeah, what's going on? I had someone now to move it. Now someone's already called me.
So he's grown substantially. I think there's just one.
Yeah. I have to give her a call. Yeah, I mean, two is fine.
Yeah.
I'm concerned
Okay, well, let me. So I think I can't do Thursday, I believe it's Tuesday.
Thanks, Steve. Straight up.
We'll get to it tomorrow. All right, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. You're welcome, bye.
Are you sure that thing is passing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll double check, I'll check with, again, I'll call Shameless.
They didn't have nothing up there.
I know, but it's in the club, it's the little hall they have there.
I never been in there.
It's not,
Okay.
it's not a fancy place.
Okay.
I'll call Shameless.
No, if it's, yeah, I
Yeah,
just,
I'm gonna go, because I thought it was the 10th. He said, no, my brother said, no, it's the 11th. No, get me a ticket, I'll be there.
they said they taking, money at the door too.
Okay.
So they told me I can't.
I'm going.
Yeah, I mean,
It's just a bar.
I'm always overdrawn, so, but I just want to make sure.
I
I'm
understand.
happy early. Yeah.
Got it.
I've only been there since January 2023. They got involved in new court papers. He's excelled more than anyone. And just because he's always willing to take out new things, always, taking on like a lead role with it's not committed to certain. And it's got other coworkers. He's been a little bit of tough things that but he's persistent and he's also that's a great attribute.
I got my car back today. I'm so happy.
What happened?
A school bus hit me.
When?
A month ago. Oh, wow.
You okay?
Yeah, I was fine. I mean, he just came over in my lane too far. I literally, it was no impact. I thought he just knocked my mirror back. But when I pulled over, he dented the whole front, like the whole thing. He like knocked it back. So, all new parts. Because they tried to like send me a check and say, oh, it's this much. The guy bought it to say, no, he said this car is new. It doesn't have no dents on it. He said, I'm not putting no extra parts on, putting in all the good parts. So
had it done. And then so I said, well, you can only keep the rental for X amount of days. She said, don't worry about that. So I bring the rental back tomorrow.
Yeah. We're trying to change that there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's slow and steady, but it's increments, they're very legitimate staffing accommodations. We've tried some things, it takes a while, but he's always been, we want something done, to the best that can be done. Well, that's fine. I'm not gonna hold it. I would wait for him to, let me know he's in yourself, even though, you know what I mean? Yeah, that's also. And I said, the first one, this is the first time I'm doing that. You try. Keep trying this. There's always an opportunity out there for everyone. Just a matter yeah.
You started right before I started. Jesus, 2022. So it's a long 2 years, less than 2 years. Around 2 years.
Yeah, they're gonna make sure he doesn't, they're not sharing any information with anything else. I know that, I know.
He's been really good also with our seasonal staff. This year we just hired seasonal staff. And now that we're exhausting his little caretaker, things are right about that again. We're hoping that balance people, seasonal, the great staff. Also, I'll use it very encouraging. That's staff as well, so trying to get more great people on the team,
Well, one day at a time, still working in progress. Everything, and, hey, we just do our best. Thank you for all your assistance with the Finance Committee.
It's a lot smoother this year.
Yes, very much so. All we have great impact in our community. With the community part of this thing. Saturday was wonderful. A lot of people came. A lot. We gave away about 3 school bags and school supplies. I suppose that's what it's a lot more food, so, information.
Very interesting competition, by the way.
Yeah.
Did you miss anything?
And hey, this man is very great. He does the questions like that. I was screaming. At the end of the day, we have to stay on the right side of all of everything. Not shy.
Excuse me. Great, that's interesting. Too fast.
I drink that whole can of soda. We're gonna vote on everything, so just a clean motion on everything that people want. Okay. It's a ginger ale though, there's amendments that can try not to drink dark soda, try not to. Pretty straightforward. You ready? Thank you, Don.
You're on. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your patience. We are resuming our meeting. We have closed the public portion, so now we will proceed with deliberations. Alder DeCola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move favorably, item 1.
Second.
Item 1 has been moved favorably. The queue is open. Discussion of item 1. Just to remind colleagues, item 1 is the contract between the Board of Education and Artis Energy Solutions for energy monitoring at the Board of Education. Discussion, Alder Walker-Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in favor of this item. I believe we have some experience with this entity and we'll be able to look at others in the upcoming year. And I just think it's important that we continue with the entity that was doing the work so far, and then we'll understand how much of savings we are actually saving for energy monitoring our education schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Walker-Myers. I see, was it Alder Farrar Santana who was on the queue?
Yes, I would
If we
like,
could put the microphone, thank you so much.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a recommendation that we put the amount of the actual amount of the expenditure, 104,808, into the order.
Mhm. Can I have a motion to amend the item that, let's look at the second to last sentence. Now therefore be ordered by the Board of Alders of the City of New Haven that the agreement with Artis Energy Solutions for energy monitoring services, comma, in the amount of $104,808, comma, is hereby approved. Do I have a motion to amend it thus?
So moved. Second.
Okay. Discussion of this amendment. Any discussion of this amendment? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion is amended back to the item as amended. Alder Farrar Santana, do you want to keep the floor? Do you have anything to say on this?
No, I just wanted to make it consistent.
Thank you. Further discussion from colleagues? Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to note also that this was from July 1st and that we made it a point to mention to Mr. Carter to bring back a message to the Board of Ed to be prompt on their requests and that these items should not be started until they are heard by the Board of Alders and their approval. And we also asked for data regarding the electrical meters and the optimization of energy at the schools and see how that is going and what the savings is to those. I mean, in essence, I don't think we have a choice but to be in favor because this started July 1st of 2024. So if you're looking for my decision of whether I'm in favor of it or not, I am in favor of it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa, and we'll note that yes, we did send that message to the Board of Ed through Mr. Carter, and that yes, I will definitely follow up on finding an appropriate time and place for this committee to hear back on the savings, both in terms of energy and in cost, because of this monitoring. Any further discussion of the item as amended? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion passes. Alder Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move item 2 favorably.
Second.
Item 2 has been moved favorably. Discussion. Alder Ferraro Santana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. The order reads 150,000 for the, whereas the charter of the City of New Haven for the sole source provider in excess of 150. But on the first page, it only says on the letter, it only talks about greater than $100,000. So, but the contract is actually for 360. So I would like to make a motion to change the 150 to 360 to make it match what the order should be.
Before I take that as a motion, I'll just note that the actual amount would, if we want to add it, we would add it to the effective clause near the end.
Okay.
The whereas clause is just is referencing a charter requirement.
Right.
And we should also just recall that we passed a purchasing ordinance amendment that changed some of those requirements. So we might want to double check that to make sure that the facts in the whereas clauses are correct, because in one order it was 100, the other one was 150, but one's a sole source.
Right.
So we can double check that.
Yes.
And clean that up at the second reading. But I think for tonight, I think your suggestion that the prior item is applicable here.
Okay.
And so would you like to offer an amendment that, where it says, now therefore be ordered by the Board of Alders of the City of New Haven that the agreement with Connecticut Controls Corp., comma, in the amount of $360,000, comma, is hereby approved. Would you like to offer that amendment?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Second.
That amendment has been made and seconded. Any discussion of that amendment, including the amount of the contract in the order? Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The amendment passes. Discussion of the item as amended. Alder Farrar, St. Jenna, you still have the floor. Do you have any comments?
My only comment is that he talked about doing 10 to 12 schools with a contract of $360,000. And I think we paid $360,000 for a contract for like 1 or 2 schools, and we couldn't even do that. So that is my concern, that I think he's being too aggressive to 10 to 12 schools, because it is the repair and the maintenance and replacement of the what do you call them?
Filters.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that that can be done with that amount of money. So I'm concerned about that. That would be my only question.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Further comments from colleagues, a further discussion of this item, which has been moved favorably and amended. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in favor of this item, but again, we have no choice because this too started July 1st of 2024. We did send the message and hopefully it will be received. Mr. Carter made a note saying, he said, doing too many repairs and not enough maintenance. So I'm really hoping that with Mr. Carter being in his position, that some of the maintenance will happen where the repairs that could be costly will diminish. And he also mentioned that there are some schools, or most schools, in need of new HVAC equipment. They're basically reaching their age limit, and some schools are actually failing. So we need to make sure that all of that is addressed in a timely fashion, and making sure our equipment is up to par, particularly for the safety of the staff and our children. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. I'll just, I see Alder Hamilton next. Before I call on you, I'll just note that I will be happy to follow up with our interim CAO for public schools on further updates about the state of our physical plan for the schools. Let's just know for the record that he hasn't been there for very long, and he's doing kind of a needs assessment and getting kind of an overall view of how things are going. And there's quite a state of affairs for him to sort out. But my experience with the gentleman is that he will be willing to come back to us to give us a status report. So I will make sure that we do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
At an appropriate time. Alder Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in favor of this item. Yes, it sounds very aggressive, but we have to start somewhere, and maintenance and repair on these HVAC units is coming on to winter, and anything to assure that our children are in a safe environment is necessary. So I'm in support of the item and just ask that they monitor carefully the doings and needs.
Thank you, Alder Hamilton. Further discussion of this item? Seeing none, all in favor of the item as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We'll move forward with a favorable recommendation. Alder Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move item 3 favorably.
Second.
Item 3 has been moved with a favorable recommendation and seconded. Discussion. Alder Jeanette Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in support of this item. I'm glad that our finance department was able to really do a deep dive to get an understanding of the rules and regulations of this funding, and to be able to have another 2 years to really do some good programming and resource replacement and things of that sort. I think it's really helpful. And so I definitely agree with that, with this item, and 100% in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Morrison. Further discussion from colleagues? Seeing none, I'll just observe that I too am in favor of this item, and I'm grateful for the hard work that the staff have done with the attorneys and the consultants to make sure we hit this deadline and we don't lose any money because of that. I would just note, when I look through all the MOUs, that there's a fair amount of money that has not been spent. And 2 years from now, because our staff pointed out that you need a 90-day closeout period. And so the target date for completion for a lot of these, not all of them necessarily, but a lot of these, is actually September 26th, which is 2 years from right now, not 2 years from December. And there's a lot of money that hasn't been spent. So, it's possible that we won't spend it all. And so I think it'll be in the interest of this committee and the Board of Aldermen for us to have further discussion with city staff on progress reports on these projects and how the money is being spent. But in the short term, I'm totally in favor of passing these MOUs so that we can comply with federal regulations and keep the money and spend it. Further discussion from colleagues? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The item moves forward with a favorable recommendation. Alder DeCaldo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move item 4 favorably.
Second.
Item 4 has been moved and seconded. This is the amendments to the lease and operating funding agreement between Connecticut Department of Transportation and the city, and it concerns Union Station. Discussion on the side. Alder Morrison.
I'm in agreement with this item as they continue to look at the Union Station and constantly trying to upgrade it and really make it a welcoming place. I'm glad to see that they're going to be able to do even more amendments to that property as testified on today. So I do support this item.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Alder Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also in support of the item. It'll be a nice improvement to Union Station, making it a more welcomable place. And yeah, plus for the city, so I'm definitely in favor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alder Hamilton. Further discussion, Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in favor of it as well, particularly some of the amendments that will incorporate the city property tax, that it will come back to us. All permitting and coding, building coding goes through the city, that there's a, no compete clause, as well as, no Connecticut DOT or developer objection to a hotel union. So there's a lot of things in favor of, for the city, and revenue that can be generated as well for the city. So I'm in favor of this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Further discussion from colleagues? I will just quickly add that I think it's a challenging situation because this is a Department of Transportation issue and the statutes are different, as our EDA mentioned. And so it's not the same kind of process as we've had with other state properties that were conveyed to us that we then could sell or can do a disposition agreement on. And so having an amendment that protects the city's interests and memorializes certain commitments that the state and the city have made seems to me to be a very smart and appropriate thing to do. Further comments from colleagues? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The item passes. Alder DeCola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move item 5 favorably.
Second.
Thank you very much. Item 5 has been moved and seconded. It's in regards to the title change for one of the deputies in the Parks Department, and the transfer to pay for the incremental increase in salary, budgeted salary. Discussion of this item. Discussion of this item. It's a two-part item. Title change and transfer. Discussion of the item. Alder Morrison.
I support this item as we all evolve, as departments evolve. And this is an opportunity to have an evolving, a new title and more duties assumed by a person in this role. And so I'm glad that the Parks Department has, or this division has brought this to us in order to help position them to do all the things that they need to do under Parks. And so I do support this item.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Further comments, discussion from colleagues? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. The item will move forward with a favorable recommendation. Alder DeCola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move item 6 favorably.
Second.
Item 6 has been moved and seconded. Item 6 is the agreement with the new vendor. It's the agreement only, not the fee schedule. That will be the next item. So this is just the agreement. Discussion on the item. Alder Farrar Santana.
I'm in agreement with the contract that even the Lock Management LLC for the operation and maintenance of Allen Memorial Golf Course.
Thank you, Alder Farrar Santana. Further discussion on the item. I see Alder Punzo and Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm also in agreement with this because the Lock Management has some members from the old New England Golf who did a really nice job for the past 20 some odd years. And I think this Lock Management will continue to do a great job. So I'm in favor of that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Punzo. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alder Punzo said exactly what I was going to say, that what's nice is that, yes, there's somebody retiring from New England Golf, but the remainder of the personnel is moving up and taking over under Lock Management. So it's good to have consistency and someone who is familiar with the golf course and knows the challenges as well as the all the good stuff that's out of the golf course. So I'm in favor of this item. It's also exciting to learn that there will be a year-round restaurant, and it looks like they have a dining director in place if this is approved. So I support this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Further discussion of this item? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The item will move forward with a favorable recommendation. Alder DeCola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move item 7 favorably.
Second.
Item 7 has been moved forward favorably. It concerns the fee schedule and the rule changes, changes to the fee schedule and changes to the rules for the Allen Memorial Golf Course. Discussion on the item. Discussion on the item. Alder Punzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that the fee increase should not happen. But I do agree with some of the items of this proposal. First responders and veterans and children under 12 free, and the first responders and veterans under senior rates. I agree with that, but I do not agree with the increase at this point in time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Punzo. So unless the item is amended, sounds like you would be voting no.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Further comments? I see Alder Furlow and so Alder Festa, please. Alder Furlow.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's a little difficult to adjust some of the changes that were made in the fees, allowing veterans to come, those that are under 12 to play for free, without adjusting the rate. So you're adding on one side more people, and you're decreasing the other side. And so it doesn't really have that good balance. We've heard from our chief engineer, who has stated that the plans for renovation are in progress, and we're trusting that pending any delays or any acts that cannot be foreseen, that it will stay on schedule. And we've heard that there are a number of things that need to be repaired, and that the income or the projected revenue for the price increase is about $80,000. Now that seems that that would go a little way in helping the repairs. We've also heard about increasing in those that are working their salaries. And we also heard that for a public golf course, this course is at pretty much the bottom of what's being charged in other areas. Now I know that we try to be very mindful in what we charge here in the city. We're not a suburb, we're a city. But if we expect to have a good place to play, then there has to be a price increase. Everything's going up. Everything's going up. And if we're going to pay for things, then this is the way we have to go. And so it was moved favorably, and I am in favor of giving this a favorable recommendation to the Board of Alders. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Fairlow. Next in the queue is Alder Festa, followed by Alder Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I was torn with this, probably from notice from the line of questioning that if the construction is not complete by the time the season opens, then it did not make sense to go up in fees until we have a complete golf course. Well, our city engineer showed up right on time to settle the doubts that we had, stating that it should be, I mean, nothing is guaranteed, we know that, be ready by opening, by the season opening. If that is the case, I mean, season opening is March, April timeframe, that's 6-7 months. The structure is there, the roofs are on, the plumbing is done. So a lot of interior work has to be done, because the other concern was that winter is hitting, how much work can actually be done. But if it's mostly interior work, then a lot can be done. I was more concerned about whether the structure outside was up, and that would be where the delays could happen. We also have to remember that, you know, the fees are part of the contract with Lock Management, and they probably, you know, see that as something of a benefit as well, because if they can get this $80K to hopefully possibly fix the sand traps and maybe save up for the bunkers that are very costly, you know, we have a great golf course. I know I don't play, but I know people who do play there and they love it there. And if our fee structure is competitive, even with that $2 hike, without having to travel to the other golf courses that are public, because I guess the other one that is pretty comparable is in Meriden. So now you have to get in your car, that's travel time, gas, etc., when we have it right here in our backyard. You know, so all that needs to be considered as well. But I will make it clear that I was hesitant with this until, you know, I feel a little more confident that the amenities will be put in place for the season start. And I'm trusting that the city will come through with that promise. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. I have Alder Hamilton, and then Alder Ferraro.
Thank you, Chair Marchand. I'm in favor of this ordinance to update the golf course fee schedule and associated rules. We're offering some new amenities like free children. Also, I heard from Ms. Bombera that even with the fee increase, this course is below in cost other courses out there, right? So, they're offering additional products. And I think, the fee schedule should be updated to align with that. So I'm in favor of the increase.
Thank you, Alder Hamilton. Alder Farrar, Centennial.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I worked with a lot of golfers, and all of them said that our golf course here in New Haven is one of the better ones that they actually played at, and they prefer to play at because they work in New Haven. They just come up, Grand Avenue up to Clifton, and they just go play golf. So I think that the fee schedule is comparable to where we need it to be. Maybe in the future, I think there's a sliding scale of it going up, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that it will help. The only thing that the people had told me was the fact that how to get to the street, the pavement, and the driveway was the issue before. But once they fixed it, there was a big difference in how people's attitude changed and a curve into going into the parking lot. So those things, people saw that, and I kept insisting that things will be done. And so they said, well, we'll wait and see. So now they do see that things are happening. So I'm very happy to say that they are.
Thank you, Alder Farrar, Centennial. Further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor of this motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
The motion carries, and it will go forward with a favorable recommendation. Thank you very much, colleagues, for your hard work and diligence this evening. And we ended sooner than I anticipated, so what a successful meeting this was. At this point, Alder Nicole.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made to adjourn. Seconded. Any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Hey, Becky?